my name is Tim Belcher. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a company called NetWitness. Before we get started, have people heard of NetWitness in the room? Anybody? Few people. In terms of an agenda, I like the slot before lunch, so if I finish early, it only helps people get the food quicker. I'm going to give a NetWitness company overview, pretty brief, a brief overview of sort of what I consider top cyber threats today, and a little bit of why I believe companies and security programs are failing. Talk a little bit about NetWitness in terms of what we do, give you an overview of our technology, and then go through use cases of what I consider sort of advanced threats or more advanced threats to corporate networks. So, and again, I'll skip most of this. 10-year-old technology born out of Intel projects for federal agencies in the DC area. About 4 years ago, we bought the technology out of a government integrator and commercialized it. It's taken us several years to actually get enterprise-level software that runs across an enterprise at scale at multi-gig speeds. We do have a security background, and I'll end on the skip to the end of this slide. Our CEO was one of the first cybersecurity czars for the federal government. He and I together founded a company called RipTech, which was one of the first, if not the first, managed security service provider, and that infrastructure is now Symantec's security monitoring service. That infrastructure still to this day monitors more networks and more security products than any other MSS service in existence. And so we have a DNA with our management team, with our people of security, and also of designing scalable services. And our goal is to provide full packet capture across enterprises. The idea, very simply, is to record absolutely everything. You don't know what the threats are today. You won't find out about the threats today until next week. You need to be able to go back and look at what occurred and do analysis on what occurred over the past, as well as the ability to interpret real-time network data across an enterprise. We do have some free software, and most of this presentation will deal with what you can download free and use today. So the use case examples, the points in the presentation where I'll stop and talk about technology are all fairly focused at that freeware technology. It also is a front end for our enterprise software, but it is available free to download. The threat landscape. So to me, you don't need much more in the way of supporting the claim that enterprise networks are being compromised on a fairly large and consistent basis. I'll say the same thing I say to many clients and many prospects. If you're not detecting significant malware infestations, you're simply not detecting it. It's not that they're not happening across your network. These are some recent, but there's not the Google instances, the Neighbor instances that we actually released a couple months ago, several others. There's very few weeks that go by in security without headlines talking about compromised corporate networks. Why is this? In my estimation, the top threats are simply not preventable, and I'll start with spear phishing. Our networks would be secure if we get rid of the users. Spear phishing will always work, and I'll get into more depth about sort of advanced spear phishing. There is no way to stop, and there will not be a way to stop all spear phishing across the board. Poison websites and DNS and drive-by attacks. The way they're poisoning systems and the way they're infecting you is changing on a daily, sometimes weekly basis. That trend is not going away. Pervasive botnet infections. We're seeing not only significant botnet infestations, but using that botnet infestation to seed second and third and fourth botnet infestations to make sure they have 3 or 4 different ways to get back into your network. Malware. We'll spend a little bit of time during this presentation talking about malware, but malware is a problem that we knew about a decade ago. We knew if you were a good developer and you wrote a custom piece of bad code, antivirus wasn't going to catch you. We knew that you could take the same bad code and recompile it a different way, and it would get by 99% of the antivirus engines. Malware today is simply the realization that the bad guys caught onto that idea and are doing well with it. Social networking, the more we move to social networking and mobility and Web 2.0 and even the next one, cloud computing, the more we're putting out about ourselves, the easier it is to spear phish, the easier it is to get you to a website that's Trojan for a drive-by. It's all a circle in terms of compromising the users in your enterprise. Cloud computing is so I don't put IPv6 on this. If I were to put IPv6, I would tell you the worst thing about IPv6 in the world is that that you can choose to encrypt your communication. The bad guy can choose to encrypt his attack against you, and you're blind to the actual application layer attack. Cloud computing is similar in that your CIOs, your IT departments are going to move to cloud without the consent, the cooperation, and sometimes the understanding of the security departments. Enterprises across the board, government agencies are moving to cloud computing and simply taking that data and putting it out of their control. So while it has significant benefits from an IT perspective, from a security perspective, it is wrought with concern. Undetected data exfiltration, so the criminal elements, and we'll get into this as well, have ramped up their data exfiltration, the actual process of stealing data once they get a victimized host. We'll go through some of those examples. And then product vulnerabilities are certainly not going away. They haven't gone away over the last 2 decades. We can only expect more. So those are the problems. Who's exploiting the problems? These electronic criminal groups, we'll call them criminal groups, are becoming much more organized, and we'll go into depth a little bit later about how they organize. But from very small mob, low-level mob groups in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Russia, to very large organized IT environments that serve and provide the IT support to many of those types of organizations. They are becoming much more organized. Their capability is getting better and better month after month. Their understanding of your network and your defenses is getting better month after month. And they're in it for the money. Very, very simple. They're not going to compromise you if they can't make money. They're making money off of everything they take from you, be it a user credential, be it a document, be it something else. You'll sort of see how that feeds into itself. And then you have nation-sponsored activities. So we do a lot of work with the federal government. Many of our developers are cleared. Many of our customers are high-profile government agencies. We do see state-sponsored activities, but I see it more often in commercial than I see it in the government. There's not a single network that I've been on over the last year that doesn't have some kind of infiltration problem with systems from China. I'm not saying it's China, but systems from China, systems from the Ukraine, systems from Russia. 2 years ago it was Russia, last year it was China. Today it's a complete mix of 8 or 9 different countries. And you are seeing coordination in them as well as staffing. I'll speak more about it. And again, their intent is to steal data and access to support cyber offensive programs. If you don't think the United States doesn't have the capability to hack into a foreign country, then and do physical damage and interrupt systems, then you're living in a little bit of a fantasy world. If you don't think that almost every other country wants that capability coming back at us, again, I don't think you're really looking at the way the world works today in a realistic manner. And we're seeing some examples of it. Google would not have gone public with I guess what's termed publicly Aurora, had they not had evidence that they were targeting specific dissidents. Going back to the front, I would classify that type of attack as state-sponsored versus financial gain. There wasn't much financial gain in targeting Chinese dissidents. So a little bit about what our clients see. So I talked a little bit about the problems from a general perspective in terms of the attack vectors, talked a little bit about who the attackers are, a little bit about what our clients are seeing. So we are seeing significant designer malware, meaning customized, start-to-finish malware that does nothing but attack your network. Seeing covert network channels and obfuscated network traffic. There's not a couple of weeks that comes by that I don't get a call from someone in San Antonio or someone up in Maryland saying, hey, I need to be able to export this data because I've broken some encryption scheme used in this piece of malware, and they want it to be coded in real time. I see that less when I'm working with clients directly than I do when I'm working with the federal government, those types of custom encryption, but it is on the rise. Low and slow data exfiltration. So, 2 things. Sending out data in bulk is a thing of the past. They'll trickle it out over a significant period of time. We're also seeing a lot of malware now launch and not do anything to the system. doesn't touch the registry, doesn't touch the hard drive, doesn't do anything for 90 days before it ever tries to install itself into the registry or the hard drive. If you're doing malware analysis, trying to figure out what this executable does by looking at network traffic, by looking at registry or file changes, nothing's going to happen in 90 days unless you're sitting around waiting. It's not going to do anything. There's also a rapid increase in malware that can detect VM environments. So if it launches in a VM, it'll do one thing. If it launches outside a VM, it'll do a completely separate thing, or it'll do nothing. And this rogue encryption I mentioned before, we're starting to see, this is early, but I think this is on the rise. In the next couple of years, you'll start seeing very custom encryption schemes used for malware to communicate across networks. Organized criminal group attacks. The time to exploit now, from given the custom malware kits that are available like Zeus, from infestation to actually taking money out of your account has gotten significantly lower. I don't know if people in the room are familiar. If a hacker steals money out of your bank account, the bank is likely on the hook to replace it. If that same hacker steals money out of a small business account or a corporate account, the bank will not replace it across the board. They're not required to by law, and they won't. So about a year ago, you started seeing all these organizations in the eastern Ukraine and Russia start to compromise small to medium-sized businesses, restaurants, construction companies, small banks directly. And the time from compromise to actually wiring money out of the account has gotten down to minutes in some cases. In some cases, it'll actually pop up a web screen when you log into your bank saying, banking services are temporarily unavailable, please wait. This system will refresh every minute, and in the next 5 minutes, all the money's been siphoned out of the account to money mules across the United States.
We analyzed an attack like that a little while ago, some stuff we did in North College. The original attack came out of Romania through Amsterdam, but then as soon as he fell victim to it, he put in any information, he went to a work in St. Clair.
Sure. They're recruiting money mules off of Craigslist. They're recruiting money mules off of every single job posting website. You may work at home. You see those work at home spams. If you respond to 5 of them, one of them will be a money mule offer. I guarantee you. And we'll talk a little bit about how they do that. So easily. Another thing on the top that's retail point of sale and ATM systems. I've heard 4 banks over the last 6 months tell me that whoever broke into their bank knows more about ACH transactions than the bank knows. They're actually inserting into, so a bank will take this automated clearinghouse transaction of 10,000 money transfers. It's your automatic payment, your direct deposit, for instance, out of a financial institution. They'll pull together this transfer and they'll send it to a clearinghouse for the clearinghouse to do it. Between the time the system sent it and the time the system received it, it's been modified and there's 18 additional records in the middle of it. Pre-formatted, it's got headers on both sides of the bulk transfer that's saying this is this many bytes, here's the CRCs for these. Everything has been pre-calculated and what the clearinghouse received had 18 additional transactions. No one in the bank could make that happen if they tried. So there is a sort of an uphill battle in terms of expertise in their domain. That last one, theft of data, the application database and middleware layers. The ability for an adversary now to learn your custom application is nowhere near as difficult as you thought it was. 2 decades ago, we were doing a penetration test of the FAA. I think I was on a team, one of the first teams to do an actual penetration of the air traffic control network. And they gave us 6 targets. And when we got into the 6 targets, one of them was the digital link air protocol, the DLAP system. It's that system that tells an airplane you have 500 feet between you and the ground. We were able to reverse engineer the protocol going back and forth between the planes and actually prove in a lab environment that we could modify the amount of feet between the airplane and the airplane. That it drew a crowd at the time. It took us weeks and drew a crowd of people and at the end of it, I finally realized why there was a crowd coming. No one understood the protocol. So we were reverse engineering this protocol. They just wanted to come see how it worked. And today, once inside a network, analyzing your custom business application that's built off of standards and your JDBC infrastructure over here, your Microsoft SQL or Oracle database over here, they know those systems as well as you do, if not better. And learning how you're doing business is very easy. And so this is an example. This is actually a fairly low-end example of guys attacked against one of our financial clients. The client made most of this slide. And it took about 6 months to build this picture. So what was happening on the left, if you looked over at the drop sites, the phishing, the keyloggers, the botnets, all the malware infestation, it's all on the left. That's what the bank was dealing with. They get a new piece of custom malware, it was sitting outdated, it was they would clear the infestation, they'd be reinfested, they'd go work on this one. They started putting together where these things were being dropped from in terms of drive-by sites, in terms of phishing attacks, in terms of registrations to who was lookups and registrations to net blocks to where the attacks were coming from. And they started to connect the dots between them and other services they started to uncover the more and more they got in. So once one of these things would get in and send data, they would follow the data stream, get into the target system and figure out who registered it, what types of connections it has to other services. And they first put it together as validation services. So when credit cards were taken from the bank, there was a completely separate group of people maintaining this validation service. And this is about a year old. They were using Red Cross. If you've not heard about it, they'll take a credit card. They'll charge $2 to Red Cross, donate money, get a successful donation. They know the credit card's worth more, and they'll sell it. Completely separate organization, but connected through some of the WHOIS lookups and registrations and networks involved. And then they started getting into these forums where they were swapping data. Literally, they were taking thousands or hundreds of thousands of credit cards and swapping data on these card forums. Then they were actually going into additional services set up. Some of them, one service would register domains. So if you're a botnet writer and you want to see 50 websites with your piece of malware, you would go to the guy in the IT organization for this criminal organization and say, I need 50 new domains registered. And he would go, here's 50 new domains. Never been used before. These are clean. 2 weeks later, you go to him and say, okay, these 50 have all been listed on malware sites. I need 50 more. That organization is responsible for creating and giving you domain names. It's a very complex organization and how data flows through it. The point I wanted to make is from the left, these are the guys stealing data. The guys who are the low-end botnet writers, the guys collecting actual data from your keyloggers and their phishing attempts. On the right is the people taking wire transfer money out of the accounts, managing money in your group, and things like that. It is over here on the right that we believe a lot of this information is being shared with state-sponsored adversaries, meaning it would be almost impossible to operate an organization like this in China, given China's government, without some sort of tacit approval. I'll let you guys do this, but when I come to you and want to get in GE, give me accounts that you've told for GE money. If I come to you and say, I want you to search for this type of document, with documents with these keywords in it, send me those documents. If you do that, I'll let you operate with a little bit of unity. And we're starting to see more and more of that. And then you get to this concept of advanced persistent threats. I don't know if any of you have heard this concept or are sick of this concept over the last several months. But the idea that someone would target you to get into your company is one aspect of an advanced persistent threat. Pick you out, research you, send you a custom crafted phishing email, break into your account, and use that access to get more data. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a large agency, and they had this is their description to me, they have a scientist in a field of energy that is the preeminent scientist in the world, and he presents at conferences all over the world, and that's what he does. Again, the way the guy described it to me, it was very much like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, if you've watched it. Absolute top in his field. It's an email, it's a PDF of a presentation from someone in Taiwan that's presenting at a conference in Beijing University, saying, I used some of your latest published research in my presentation on the same field of energy research. And I wanted to get your opinion on my conclusions. So the scientist tried to open it, and the firewall actually blocked it. So the scientist responded to the person sending the email and said, hey, I tried to open it, I can't get it. At which point, the person responded back to him and said, well, try this. And he zipped it up and sent it across. And the firewall took out the zip file. He said, no, that didn't work either. So he goes, well, I'm going to password protect the zip file and send it to you. And this email conversation goes on for the course of 2 weeks. The guy's sending him, like, you send it links, saying, I put a document up here, go get it. This guy's really trying to get this document. What's interesting about it, when they started looking at the email correspondence in the actual paper, It was an actual scientist in the same exact field who had used published research from this scientist in his paper. They created a fictitious account around this other scientist, and we're using this fairly advanced custom subject to get this guy to click on a downloaded document. It also goes to prove that no matter what, phishing's still going to work. If that guy's going to click on it and try so hard for several weeks to click on it, the problem's not going away. So a little bit about why security teams are failing. The first one's a tough one to accept, but I'll say it. People just don't understand the complexity and the capability of who's attacking them. They really don't. You hear it time and time again, well, I was compromised, I cleaned it up in a week, and I'm good to go. I'm going to walk around, and I'm not going to focus on what data they had access to. I'm just going to clean it up and move on. It's not my problem, not my mission. And the second one, in many cases, security teams simply lack knowledge or experience. So security, like any other industry, was a very small industry. Now it's very large. There's training programs. There's college courses. This at Maryland has some absolutely horrible ads that they recruit people to do security. And again, the talent is not present in every organization. In organizations where there is significant talent, I've been to many, in many cases the expertise is ineffective because they don't have the answers they need, given the mission, given the amount of data they're doing. It's simply lack of answers. They can't ask their networks a simple question. Process plays a role. Again, for the last 10 years, everyone in security that had a leadership position, your CSOs, your CISOs, have said, I don't want to be part of IT. I want to report directly to management, directly to the CEO. I don't want to be part of the IT organization. You know what that did over the course of 10 years? It made them not have any power to make IT decisions. And then you have a technology concern, back to the fact that we're rushing to the cloud. Infrastructures are legacy, they're grown. We've through the course of all these different security products that people have introduced over the last 20 years, we've conditioned security experts to say, well, if something hurts today, there's got to be some magic box that I can plug in my network to fix it. And 6 months later, something else hurts, there's got to be another magic box. So you've got 20 or 30 magic boxes running around every single organization, some of which haven't even been logged into in the last 6 months. And this is also why what we do, I guess, at this conference specifically is important. There is only one solution to this, and that's record everything. The fact that you don't have, and it's something that wasn't available 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you couldn't say, I'm going to put a petabyte of disk space out and record everything for the last 60 days. Well, today, a petabyte of disk is much smaller, much less expensive than it used to be. It's 500 2-terabyte drives. You can buy that at Micro Center for $40,000. If you bought it direct from manufacturers, it's about $30,000 worth of hard drives. It's not something that we have to be so concerned about in terms of budget constraints. Back to that concept, we kept, firewalls. We kept putting these point solutions. Firewalls have become essentially ineffective given the way we communicate. Firewalls had about a 5 or 10 year period where they ruled all on the network, and then all of our applications, the way we live on the internet, systematically poke holes into it to the point where it's almost ineffective for them. Almost every single exploit that you download into your environment communicates over protocols that are allowed to go through your network, not protocols that aren't. They're designing malware to use obfuscated paths like DNS. We did a penetration test in 1993 of a bank where we created a reverse command and control DOS shell. If the guy opened the executable, it popped up a DOS prompt on our window from his box. We used DNS, reverse DNS specifically, to proxy those commands out of his network through his firewall in 1993. A couple of years ago at Black Hat, someone was streaming 160K music through DNS. These protocols are very, very old. You can misuse them to send data, and most malware will today. You move on from firewalls to intrusion detection and prevention systems. Depending on the report you look at, IDS, IPS systems are detecting some 30% of what they think they know about. So given 60 or 70% of attacks are going right by, some of the most common intrusion detection systems in the world can't unzip data that's gzipped or chunked as it comes across. They can't uncompress before they look at the stream. Most of them can't. If you look at a network and say, show me how many web sessions have chunked or gzip data, it's about 30% of the public communication you do today. 30% of your web traffic is absolutely blind to most intrusion detection systems. No wonder they're getting such low detection rates. And then we'll spend a second here about antivirus. It's almost easier to start at the other end. I got an email this week talking about a customer that caught this particular piece of malware, and in the middle of it they said, by the way, Kaspersky caught this. And I said, wow, intrusion detection system caught a piece of malware. It's almost gotten to the point where it's completely flipped on me. I'm so used to the not detecting custom malware or anything associated with it that when one does, it's actually an event to discuss. As an example, anyone familiar with VirusTotal? You guys do packets and submit executables to VirusTotal? You ever heard of scanforyou.biz? So scanforyou.biz is a Ukrainian-Russian version of VirusTotal. You log in and you pay $25 a month or 15 cents per verification, US only, and they support PayPal and others. You submit your executable to it, it will tell you on the right there which one of these 30 or 40 different security products detected. More than antivirus up here, like you'll see all of them, all the major antivirus players are up here. They're actually detecting inclusion of lists on the internet, things like malware domains, things like intelligence services. They actually have semantic deep site information. I have no idea how they get it, sort of commercial intelligence. But they're doing it. If anything about your executable shows up in any of these, they'll tell you. Here's the kicker. For $25 a month, you can submit them the executable and they'll monitor it. They'll keep running it every single hour. They'll tell you when someone discovers it. Submit them the unpacked executable. They'll create a custom packed version of it as soon as people discover it and send you a new custom packed version of it. Very, very insidious. So this was up for several months, since November of last year. In February, it was taken down by Whois. They essentially took the domain away, blackballed the domain. It popped right back up a week later behind the Gumblar botnet. So thousands of Gumblar hosts. All you have to do is use their fast flux to get to the site. Gumblar actually is just ignoring the entire standard put forth by the internet in delivering DNS resolution to this. So again, it's another problem that's simply not going to go away. They're not going to stop doing what they're doing, and antivirus will get less and less effective over the next decade. And again, so to reinforce this, this is why we do what we do, looking at packets, looking at networks. There is no silver bullet. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be secure. The best we can do, and this is why I firmly believe in the entire industry in terms of network forensics or full packet capture, every company eventually will have to capture everything. They'll have to have some level of history associated with their network to go back and answer these questions they didn't know they needed to answer. Once you have it, regardless of the technology, whether it's us, Solaris here, Nixon here, Case has new sensors they deploy, regardless of the technology, at least you have a fighting shot at getting back and getting the data. What's more important than collecting the packets, though, in my opinion, is using the packets to answer questions, using the actual data. When you're using a definitive copy of everything that came in or left your network to answer these questions, your answers are by nature much less ambiguous than looking at log files, looking at partial answers, looking at partial on-demand captures. If I can go back over the last month and say, who else went to this website as part of my investigation, I can bring an entire new dynamic very quickly to investigate these threats. This is sort of a little bit of a salesy slide, so I won't spend any time on it. Sorry. These are questions that people can ask of NetWitness as a company, but it applies to some degree or another to everyone in the field. With us, I think we're differentiated more to the application level. So I'll give you some examples of that. I can ask questions like, who else communicated with this domain name? Who's using Skype? Who's using anonymizing services? Regardless of the IPs involved, regardless of the ports involved, you can ask these sort of more application level questions. All right, so I'm going to give a quick, just so before I get into the use case examples, so you understand what I'm talking about in terms of evidence. What do we do? First and foremost, we do network capture across an enterprise. So if you have 50 internet connections, you can put 50 sensors out there and capture everything. and we make all the data, all the packets are stored in principally valid packet databases. Packets are then sessionized by creating two sides of every conversation, putting the sides of the conversation together, and then analyzing the conversation. That's a very simple idea of what we do. But we do take signatures. We actually do support some signature languages like snort rules. But we also support analytic rules. If I see someone over HTTP do a get of a small session of a file named .bin, as an extension, that has this byte signature at the beginning of the file, create an alert. It could be very high level sort of application level questions. And who buys us security programs that need to augment what they're doing? If a security program realizes what they're doing is failing, then we can bolster all the other purchases they make. So if they have all these firewalls and all these point solutions, malware's still getting through, they're still getting riddled, they're still getting compromised, they need to investigate quicker, they need to get to the answers quicker. That's typically the budget. And the way people usually use us is they use a SIM, something like ArcSight, something like RSA's Envision. And they'll look at a security event and they'll say, show me everything that happened between these players an hour before and an hour after. And I want all the packets associated with it. Pretty much the most common use case. In addition to that, it's malware hunting, it's custom, it's looking for custom exploits, drive-by exploits, custom attacks, sort of APT type level issues, personnel investigation, things like that. This is a slide I wanted to get to. Spend a minute here. So on the left, you've got these things called decoders, big appliances that capture all packets. As I said before, they create packet databases, they take all the packets and they essentially what you're used to in Wireshark, the most common function you use, I guarantee, is follow TCP stream. So we do that across all protocols, not just TCP. We sessionize UDP, we sessionize ICP, we sessionize ARP. We try to make conversations happen and analyze the data. And we take primarily, after we process the network portion of a packet, we take the payload and we create sides of the conversations. We have side A, side B. Side A, side B go together, that's a network session. We take the payload and we scan it. All this happens on the decoders. When we scan it, we're looking for keywords. We're looking for tokens. We're trying to identify things, and it's all extensible logic. But if I see one side say HTTP 1.0 followed by the other side saying get, it's likely an HTTP session. I don't care what port it's on. I don't care what protocol it's over. If I see that over DNS, someone tunneling HTTP over DNS, I'm going to classify it as a valid DNS session and a valid HTTP session. It doesn't matter to me. If I see someone put a file name or get a file name, I'm going to take the file name and I'm going to store the file name. I'm going to store the extension. If it's in a directory, I'll store the directory. If it's a username, I'm going to store the username. We try to take as much intelligence out of that conversation in real time as possible when we store those values. And that layer of green you see on the left is our databases. So if I have all the values, every username, every email address I've seen, every protocol, every file name, etc., the database lets you intersect those to ask questions. Show me everyone who's gone to this domain name and requested this file is a question of the network that can be now answered. So the result of that is going to be the actual sessions, the actual packets that you're interested in. In the middle, we have this sort of metadata framework. Everything I've been talking about in terms of usernames, email addresses, content types, actions like login, gets, puts, they're all pieces of metadata. They all can be intersected and combined. On the bottom, you have this live fusion. This is the ability, there's 15, we include 15 different sources of intelligence data on the internet. Malware domains is a free example. Sands is a free example. Commercial examples would be Semantic Deep Site and others. These guys that track bad host names, bad IP addresses, we sort of fuse that data in real time. If you go to one of those websites, we'll append pieces of data. Semantic says this is bad. Malware domains thinks this is bad. Once you have that infrastructure in place, then you can use applications to access it. I'm going to spend time on Investigator. Investigator is also a free download, and there'll be a download link at the end of the presentation. So everything I'm showing you is sort of relative to free analysis. It reads in PCAP data, just like Wireshark. There's a button on it to open the actual session. It opens it in Wireshark. It's very seamless integration with Wireshark. We try to stay at an application level and a session level. Wireshark, intra-session level, packet analysis type stuff. And Informer, I'll skip a little bit of this. doing on time. So let's talk about what Investigator is. So now that I've extracted all these pieces of metadata and I can ask questions of the network, Investigator lets you navigate that. Would you guys like, instead of this, to see it instead? Is that better? Slide right. This is Investigator, so I'm going to open up a collection. Consider this a PCAP. It came from a PCAP. And this has somewhere in the neighborhood of 11,000 sessions in it. It has over 250,000 packets in it. What I'm displaying on the screen is all the metadata values, top 20 specifically for each report. As I click on HTTP here, you'll see the trail at the top. I've actually navigated into HTTP. Now, every other piece on the screen is only concerned with HTTP traffic. If I want to see HTTP traffic to China involving executables, it's 3 clicks. I've created this cookie trail, HTTP to China involving executables. Now I'm down from some 20 or 30,000 sessions to 11. If I want to look at those sessions, I simply click on them. On the right is the data we're extracting in real time across the board. As I use Investigator to import a PCAP, it does this for you in seconds. It's as fast, if not faster, than actually opening a chart. So on the top, you'll see all the network data, and then you'll start getting down to this application layer. There was a get of a root directory of a JavaScript file. The referring website was this. The client was Mozilla 4.0. The alias IP vault was this. There's a domain name, etc. And we'll start scrolling down to other actions in that same session. Get this executable file, get that executable file, etc. So what happens is the person goes to this website, downloads JavaScript, and suddenly downloads 11 different executables. This is how we analyze data on the right. If I want to see the session, I simply click on it. Best. And you'll see it was a Chinese HTTP 404 website, so file not found, can't do anything. Then the client downloaded this text file, listing out all the executables, and then they started downloading executables. If I open that, that's actually a piece of malware. So it's sort of a shotgun approach. But the idea is to keep analysts away from the packets until they need to get to the packets. So I need to see the data, the actual packets. The website, Google looks like Google, YouTube looks like YouTube. You can see what the person saw in sort of a reconstructed view. If I need to see the packets, I can click on it and look at a packet representation. I need to see the extra textual representation. Text in this example is actually sort of interesting because I can scroll down and see the obfuscated JavaScript that caused the client to download those executables. And this button over here is I can open it actually in Wireshark and just take that entire session, or those 50 sessions or 5,000 sessions, dump them into Wireshark and look at the actual packets. In addition, it allows you to ask your network questions. I'm going to look this way. I mentioned report protocol agnostic. I click on HTTP and then go down and look at Ethernet protocols. They're all IP. However, you see that one UDP session, almost all of it's over TCP. I start looking at ports, and you'll see all sorts of TCP ports and UDP ports. I've seen HTTP over ICMP. You see that on a customer network. I almost guarantee that's bad. So it is fairly port protocol agnostic. In addition to HTTP reconstruction, which a Google website looks like Google, instant message conversations look like instant message conversations. Let's go back to the root. Service type MSN, for instance. And view all the Microsoft Instant Message conversations. You'll see most of them actually have no chat. You start to see some that do have chat. And
do you offer any type of API on top of this?
and here your what's pardon me?
Do you offer any type of API on top of this software?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, there is an SDK that comes with this. It's free to use, especially with it's much more usable in the actual enterprise version of the software that is sort of on a PCAP basis, but we actually use it quite often on working off PCAPs and things like that. It also reconstructs SMTP POP emails. As a matter of fact, all webmails, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, everything looks like an email. Attachments you can open directly out of it. Voice over IP, you can hit play and listen to the conversation. The idea is to keep an analyst away from the packets so they need to answer more and more questions. I think that's enough of a primer. I can answer any more questions later.
That was all investigator.
That's investigator, and that's what's free to download. Informer is, I won't spend any time on this. If you buy an enterprise, I need to create reports. I need a PDF document every single morning, or a Word document with my boss, or I need a dashboard that charts alerts and threats and things. Informer does that. It's from an analyst perspective, if you find yourself doing the same 50 things every single morning when you walk in, look for these executables from this region of the world. Show me who's digging into certain types of alerts or types of values. Automate it. Create a PDF report so that when you walk in the door, it's automatically done. Informer does that. I talked a little bit about Live before. Live is that fusion of network data. Live can be extended to your own data, though. So every single list of information you have can be included in Live network capture. So if you have, for instance, you work with a government client that has every IP address manually assigned in every system in their 20 or 30,000 deployed. They don't use DHCP or anything else. They have every single IP address asset tagged down to the point where they know the building and the cubicle number. They took all that information and imported it in, and they almost don't use IP addresses anymore. They actually navigate on building numbers, they actually navigate on cubes, they actually navigate on usernames associated with it or badge IDs. It doesn't matter. If you have your own information or you're developing your own information, you can actually import it in. Once you have all that information and you can navigate on it, this is just showing you that you can navigate where things exist. So show me all the sessions on my network that any threat source told me was dangerous. And then you can see who tags the same sessions. So I can actually statistically tell you how many websites are tagged by deep site versus keyword. Let's see what's going to match. And again, this is more enterprise stuff. This is the ability, we integrate with almost any SIM that you use. So regardless of what you're doing for your event analysis, we have a solution that will get you the packet data fairly quickly, usually with just the right mouse click. Lastly, you mentioned agility. You mentioned the SDK. So the enterprise software ships with a software development kit. It is a C API wrapped in 6 different languages. We also just implemented our first RESTful implementation, so you can do native RESTful applications. Very flexible at the bottom level. What we parse out is fairly extensive right out of the box. So Investigator, when you download it, will parse out everything that I'm showing you today. It can be extended. If I don't understand a protocol, you can take flex parsing and write your own protocol. It's an XML document, sometimes 10 lines long, sometimes 100 lines long. But you can move left or right, find tokens, extract the middle, store it as a username, move on, etc. You can extend what we extract out of network data significantly. And then you can deploy sort of as many boxes as you need to side by side in almost a clustered environment. We have governments that are monitoring 20 gigabit backbone with racks and racks of server. And then on top, you can even extend what we consider verbs, nouns, and adjectives. So, I'm trying to think of these examples. I had an enterprise customer that wanted to analyze every Dr. Watson report. Sorry, I'm aging myself. Every Microsoft system crash report, online crash report, whatever they call it now. It left their network because they wanted to see what was crashing. Well, that package actually goes to Microsoft unencrypted, so they wrote a quick flex parser to extract the data out. It's primarily file names, so they can say, well, I'm starting to see a lot of buffer overflows or a lot of crashes in this particular DLL or this particular system file. But some of it was process ID, so it doesn't neatly fit into file names. So they actually made their own categories of DR Watson file names, DR Watson process IDs, and they can actually navigate on it as they extract it out. So it's literally completely extensible. So I'm going to go on to the examples. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. We're on until when? One. Any questions before I go into the examples? And so these will just slowly walk through some how to use Investigator to do these use cases. This is let's see, somewhere around 40,000 network sessions, 500,000 packets. So I don't know if you've ever loaded 500,000 packets into a packet analyzer, but it's very difficult to sort of get a sort of a generic view over this. But this is what it looks like in seconds when you load it into Investigator. And I've highlighted some things on the screen to point out. There's a high DNS count. There's a high SMTP count. And if I look at the host names, they're mostly connects. That combination stands out fairly quickly as a spamming botnet. No big deal. I start looking down the screen at other pieces of information on the screen. You'll see quite a bit of errors. There were 379 access denied. There were 16 not found. There were 12 method not allows. There were 9 forbiddens. There were 5 bad requests. There's only 848 HTTP sessions. Most of those sound like HTTP errors to me. Quite a lot of errors given sort of the comparison. I look at the email addresses and it's just all over the place. There's 2,367 email addresses in this small capture file. One of the next slides. There's 2,300 email addresses plus. Again, botnet, I go back to SMTP. There weren't that many SMTP sessions. Obviously, these email messages are going out with many, many recipients. Single email subject at the bottom, welcome brother. I'll get to that in a minute. So it's all the same email going out to everybody. So this is nothing more than a botnet infestation. Botnet got installed and started to spam. But before we closed it, we noticed the file names, just random name PNG files. Quite a bit of uploads. So review real quick. We go in, like I showed you in Investigator, mail looks like mail. We go in, look at the email, greetings brother, it's some white supremacist website advertisement. Thanks for joining our forum. The link downloads malware, part of the same botnet. And it continues. So the spam is primarily to get you to download more and more of the same botnet. So what about the random file names? So I click in an Investigator to where file name exists by clicking on the actual category name. So if I click on the word file name, it will actually do that exists drill. Show me any session where I have a file name in it. SMTP usually doesn't have file names associated with it. At best, it would have an attachment. Most of them are HTTP, 808. There's 433 SMB sessions. Okay, so I know it's using web services, and I know it's using Microsoft SMB. There's 1,177 put actions. So I know there's more puts than there are actually HTTP sessions. So it's establishing an HTTP session, and it's putting a file, waiting a little while, putting another file, things I can tell without ever sort of looking into one. And again, I sort of zoom in on the file name, very random name PNGs, just taking anywhere from 5 to 9 characters, naming a PNG and uploading it. So I start actually looking into the session. File name exists. I want to start looking at the HTTP session. And on the right, you'll see all the data that we're extracting out, and it becomes fairly evident it just connects. It does a put of the root directory, uploads this random name PNG file, and then it submits this HTTP values, which is a very long string of data. At first glance, looks like it's encoded, looks like it may be encrypted. It's all uploading to Sweep. There's 807 more that look very, very similar in how they look. So I actually zoom into one of those and look at the data it's actually transferring, and it's fairly simple when you start using Investigator to see, well, this is encoded data. This is not a PNG. There's no standard artifacts for actual image data. If you hit best reconstruction, we reconstruct PNGs. If you hit best reconstruction on this, nothing happens. It's pretty much sure it's not an image. So you actually start looking at the data, it's encoded and encrypted. There's actually up top the action put. So this type of activity can be very quickly rolled into a rule. If I see a file name of PNG put out of my network into a root directory, flag it as a root put of a PNG. It's that type of logic. Well, if someone reuses this methodology later in a different type of attack, I may still have flagged the session if I can pull out the components of individual attacks. The components change less frequently than the entire attack does. There's a Google Map button. If you click it on this view, this is what comes up. So it's nice. That's all the spam. All the individual sessions are all spam. And that one red line, so we do like an edge weighting of volume of sessions. The one red line is the command and control. You trace that back. And you find out that it's going to adoresong.com. So some of these things that don't show up looking at just numbers, not so easily used. So what this turned out to be was a modified version of Wolodeck. It was a custom version of Wolodeck. All it was they were using Wolodeck because it's a great spamming bot. It's a great bot that I can almost just go download and use. It's a kit. But they were using it to exfiltrate data. They were actually spamming for one reason only, to get more and more infestations. When they got the infestations, they would actually take all the documents on the system's hard drive, break them up into portions of PNG files, encrypt them using a simple XOR, and shoot them off to adoresong.com. That total analysis took a couple of minutes, literally 10 minutes probably. So it is very powerful working at this level as opposed to working at an individual packet level, or saving the work that you do, or minimizing the work that you do at an individual packet level to only when you need to dive into that actual session or that actual protocol. Any questions on that case study? Move on to the next one. This is a case study about Zeus, so you're probably all familiar with Zeus at this point. Zeus is a commercial kit for sale. There's actually many, many versions of it available. It's only about a 2-year-old software package. If you're in the security industry, it's almost not cool if you don't make fun of the version from 4 months ago or 6 months ago. Oh, that's version 1.3. Have you seen version 1.8? That thing was amazing. They had these new features in the environment. It's almost uncool to think that 6-month-old software is getting outdated already. But the truth is, anybody can go grab the free version, which is about 6 months old, and use it. The free version is very successful at Trojanizing systems and creating reverse command and control, sending off data. It's configurable. It's a botnet in a box. It's also the single most common kit used by most of the groups out of Eastern Europe. And when you hear of I don't know if you've heard of these in your job or not. When I hear of a spear phishing attack, especially targeted at like a wide audience, I almost always think Zeus. It's a Zeus attack. They're trying to get someone to download Zeus, and they're sending out a mass distribution email. So this is an email that I find interesting. It was sent in December of 2009. It was sent from an actual NSA address to most of DISA. It's a very generic copy and paste, slight modification of some of the public or some of the semi-public presentations that the NSA have been giving over the last couple of years about needing to be able to fight a warfare in cyberspace, treating cyberspace as a very similar domain to air, sea, land, etc. And it was at the end of it said, "Hey, download our latest presentation." We gave a link and sent it out to most. Doesn't have to be very sophisticated to be successful. Thousands of people fell for that, were compromised, and data was exfiltrated all. Following the same guidelines, there was an email that went out, I believe this is only 3 months ago. It came out from dni.gov, forged email. The actual domain was something like dnicenter.com. And they sent it out to a very, very wide government audience. And the essence of it was, hey, this is a flash message traffic. North Korea just launched nuclear missiles to Japan. And it was formatted like, if you ever worked in classified environment, it had tear lines. It had these artifacts from legacy government nonsense. It was a fairly well formatted email. Here's the actual email. Here's the actual text of it. So DPRK has carried out a nuclear missile attack on Japan. You need to prepare. Here's contact information for every single agency. It even had, again, as I mentioned, Terrell. It said, hey, additional information we found in this. Here's the following report. I wouldn't have clicked on it. A lot of people did. So they were using a 9-month-old variant of Zeus, the Zeus 1.3. It was 3/5/2010 when that went out. We executed it. We downloaded it, infected ourselves, submitted the executable to Virus Total. 1 out of 42 detected it. So 9-month-old variant. People go, oh, that's 9 months old. That's nothing. There's all sorts of signatures for that. Every single antivirus company on the planet will tell you they detect Zeus. This is a 9-month-old variant. It was custom packed, and it got by all but one. You know what the one was? About 5 months ago, Symantec gave up, and they said, if I've never seen a file, I'm just going to say it's suspicious. And literally. Between the room and myself, I got in a fight with them a little bit over them saying, oh, that's nothing. When we released the new report, that's nothing, we detect Zeus. Actually, no, you don't. You didn't detect Zeus on day one. You didn't detect anywhere. Nothing did. All you said was suspicious. And I actually got on the phone with them, and they said, well, we're MD5ing every file we see across the world. And we're pulling it back. And I thought, wow, that's something I didn't know Symantec was doing to my hard drive. We're keeping this, we have several 100 terabytes of MD5 checksums. And if we don't see a file, the first time we see it, we're going to classify it as suspicious. Okay, well, that's one approach. I'm sure it's really going to work. Anyway, the first thing it did when it downloaded and executed is Zeus goes out and grabs a configuration file from its command and control server. It's typically named .bin. You can change it, but nobody does. But they download it, and the first thing it did was neuter all the AVs. The first thing it did is put host entries in for every single update for most of the antivirus companies. So nobody detected it. If you got infected, you weren't going to detect it because your software wasn't going to update it. So it is a problem. This is the very first thing that most Zeus infestations do, and it's something that they downplay to, in my opinion, to their discredit. So back to looking at the network data around it. So pretty easy. You see the FTP get, you see report.zip, download from the country destination, even though it was dnicenter.com as the alias host. Country destination was in Beijing, was China, city was in Beijing. Downloads and execute, or they download. Then it goes out and grabs the .bin. So again, we have rules in our networking, customer networks. I see a .bin on the get for any .bin, I'm just going to flag it. I'm going to look at all the .bins every single day, make sure that no one's doing something weird. Downloaded from this host update kernel.com. That was the file name, some randomly named file on our bin. You can actually open that up. It's well posted how to decipher those configuration files. Once it had downloaded, it didn't do anything. We were sort of surprised. For a couple of, I don't want to say a couple of days, it was about less than 24 hours, but more than 12 hours, we had gone home. And we came in the next morning, we realized that all these files had been FTP'd out. So it's very simple. You can see FTP, there was one session out. There's one put, one login. They put DLLs, documents, PDFs, XLSs. There's the file names. They put it in that weird directory overnight at 2 in the morning. On the host that we execute these things on when we do analysis, we seed it with a bunch of documents. We'll go out and scour the internet, look for any document, Word documents that have a bomb in them, Word documents that have like CyberNet, things like that. We'll fill up our hard drive with nonsense documents. Sure enough, it sucked off a bunch of it overnight. But one of the interesting things, one of the pieces of metadata we pull out is passwords. So out of like 25 protocols that use crypto authentication, we pull out passwords. So since they gave us a username and a password to log into their FTP drop site, we went in there and looked. And fairly, all in all, very low level of sophistication in this attack. And it was being very successful. These are directories of drop-off sites. These are all infected hosts at the top. If I change into a directory, you'll see sort of the file names that were pulled off of our network in our folder. If you start cruising the others, it became more concerning. And then they clean these regularly. So you have to log in like every 10 minutes to see which files or which systems are actually actively updated to to do this. Because they'll take documents off this site and clear it. So we started looking at all these documents, thousands of documents of them. And we started recognizing some patterns sort of subconsciously. Documents that had security were pulled off. Documents that had CYberNet were pulled off. We saw people's instructions. If you're not familiar with what CYberNet is, it's sort of classified government, one of the classified government. Security clearances, whether it had. So the documents it was pulling off, it was going from the home directory 4 layers deep, and it was looking for certain documents that had certain keywords in it. So it actually had enough intelligence in it to dump sort of textual representation, search keywords, and look for documents related to clearances or security information. Pull it off. Remember who they first sent this to. So sort of a low sophistication attack went to a big government distribution list. What they're doing when they infect you is pulling documents back that have something to do with security. What they're going to do with those documents later is use them in very targeted, very focused phishing attacks to get into certain networks they want to get into. And again, if I were to navigate into the command and control channel for Zeus, simply time graph it, this is what a botnet looks like. I'm going to check in. At least a fairly low sophistication level of botnet. We'll check in on a periodic basis. Any questions on that before we go on next?
That was a case study from 3 months ago.
Yeah. So this is one from April. I didn't do this one, so I've never seen this data. This was a customer. They sent it. Actually, the customer was presenting it at a conference last month, and I had to go up and ask for it. So this is a 0-day Java 0-day. It was first detected on April 10th or 11th. So the timeline with this one, these aren't my slides, but someone else's. The timeline with this one, April 9th. Tavis Normandy releases a Java Dev Toolkit. Affects all versions of Java. So the ability to create custom jar files that exploit this problem in Java. April 11th, active exploitation via rogue advertisements on New York Times, Fox News, Oprah, UFC, and others. I'll stop just to mention it. So they will use a JavaScript advertisement in an advertising network, and suddenly you're infected because you go to New York Times. New York Times is using the same advertising delivery mechanism. If they serve up infected JavaScript, and your client is vulnerable to that JavaScript, literally the New York Times will infect you. Obviously, you can get to their referring websites underneath, things like that, but that's how they're delivering this. So it's a pure drive-by attack, and they're using it on they're using DoubleClick or some major advertising organization to distribute it. So what do we know so far? At this point, we know the referrers are some of these major news organizations, and we know it contains a jar file, and it probably has a MIME type of Java. Okay, well, that's enough to go hunting. So you open up Investigator and you start asking those questions. Show me anything where the MIME type is application Java archive. Services 80 means HTTP. Don't get stuck on 80, it's not a port, it's an IP. And so very simple. Show me all port 80 where, or all HTTP where content is equal application Java archive. Show me anyone who downloaded JavaScript. And what you see very quickly when you get in and start looking at the file names, you'll start seeing some PHP activity around this. We have this indicator that for the last 2 years, for some reason, a lot of malware guys are lazy at naming their files. So if you see a one-character PHP flag, you have no idea how effective that is. It won't be effective when they post this video or something. All these malware guys spend so much time writing custom code that they put A.php, B.php, C.php. If you see it, it's always something good to go look at. It's certainly a high rate of false positives, but it's always a good indicator. So all these indicators sort of pop out in this guy. So we find someone has downloaded these JavaScripts, the IP sources, this IP address, the alias host, or the referring host, contains New York Times or Fox News, etc. The rogue ad directs them to this IP address, and here's what they download from that IP address in order. So they go to that directory, they download ad.php, they download the Java VM detector class, the PQ jar, and so we start looking for patterns. We want to find any like activity across the board. And what he sees is this query string where it says query string PL equals 132, CE equals true, HB equals 2, AD equals 900, whatever. It's the query string in the HTTP submission is submitting a lot of details about this notice. So we can actually drill into these text fields where query string contains this value, etc. When he starts doing it, he recognizes that he has 300 alerts, 300 sessions on the network actually impacted by the ad looking for query strings that matches, 18 sessions looking for anything where the query contained that ad collect, and then 11 where they downloaded some executable. Quite a bit of intel just in the alerts. Start digging into it, how many were compromised. Start digging into the session, you start realizing things like people transferring a GIF as an application octet. People don't transfer a GIF as an application octet, they transfer as a quantitative GIF. So you start looking at the transfer of that GIF image, and what sticks out to me pretty much is that this program cannot be run in DOS mode. Likely have an executable here. Remember that one alert from 2 back said there was an executable. So that's why I drilled into the session, sees the transfer of GIF, sees some artifacts that make it look like an executable. Navigates into anybody else on the network that has downloaded p.gif. He finds 3 separate instances of it. 3 unique hosts, spell victim. Okay. So at this point, you know pretty much, hey, I've identified the attack vector, I put in some alerts, I've taken those alerts, I've searched back over the last week, I have 3 hosts that are compromised by this. Let's go get that GIF and look at it. So I can navigate through Investigator and actually go extract the executable like I showed you. He's actually using part of the SDK to just rip it out. Go get the executable out of this session item. And it does it. But it's corrupt. There's no MZ. If you've done binary analysis, there's no MZ header in this Windows key. In fact, he uses inline antivirus along with his IPS, along with his firewall, to stop and block downloads of executables natively across the network. This got through simply by removing MZ and changing MZ. So you couldn't execute it. So for a minute he thought, well, maybe no one was, it's corrupt executable, maybe no one was affected. Starts looking at the JavaScript, and the JavaScript actually uses the exploit to overflow and change 2 characters in the file. Actually changes the 2 characters back to MZ, so the executable can be run. How rudimentary is it that you change MZ and it gets by all your antivirus, it gets by all your network defenses, and the JavaScript executable or exploit, or the Java exploit, is simply used to put those characters back to MZ once it's downloaded. Absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't take a lot of genius to get by some of these defenses. After analysis, this is what he came up with. It XOR decrypts the file and saves it as a GIF image. Writes that GIF image out to Windows MSVID 32.dll, sets the timestamp as the same as NTDLL for installation, and installs an async plugin MIME filter. It literally listens to every single bit of HTTP content and modifies it online. Disgusting little functionality. Almost done. So we put out a release March or so about Weaver. And the security community was a little bit misunderstood. We said it was a Zeus botnet, and one said, oh, Zeus is new. Well, whatever. What happened was we were investigating a botnet on the customer network. When we logged back into the command and control system, we found all the data they were stealing. So what was interesting about finding finding literally, I think it was 80 gigs of data, is we can analyze who was affected and generate statistics about who's actually infected by Zeus. I think before we released the Weaver botnet, there was a general consensus that Zeus affected individuals. Zeus affected people at home, went after their banking accounts, things like that. It didn't affect corporate America. It wasn't used for exfiltration of data. We analyzed that 80 gigs, came up with 75,000 systems. Over half of them were cross-infected with Wolodeck, and we found evidence that it was intentional, meaning guys running the Zeus botnet intentionally infected all their hosts with the second botnet that they controlled. So in case you shut down the Zeus, they had the wallet as a backup. 68,000 stolen credentials, 2,000 SSL certificate bombs, which is very important. If you're going to do online banking fraud to any of the major U.S. banks, you need to have the same certificate file that you previously configured to use with your bank. So if you start analyzing the IP addresses back to net block information, back to who actually owns those net blocks, victim organizations, there were 2,500 public, commercial sector entities. They were every aspect of the commercial sector was represented under 19 countries, etc. This was a fairly unsophisticated bot. We had 1 month of data, 80 gigabytes, 1 month. We found that it was active for 13 months. In 1 month, there was 80 gigs of data that we got access to. 68,000 credentials. Who knows what they were successful with over the last month? Primarily, they were using these pay-per-install affiliate programs to get their stuff installed. And they were primarily, when we saw it in that month, when we analyzed their bin file configuration, what they were going after, this is what they were primarily targeting. They wanted user accounts. They wanted IDs. They wanted Facebook primarily. They wanted Yahoo, Metro Flogging, Sonico, or international versions of that. They wanted access to social networking credentials primarily. They were also taking banking information and everything else, but they sent specific commands down to capture those authentication. Again, found out they were been operating for over a year. After looking at it, do you remember the DPRK example I showed you with update kernel two ago? What concerned us was when we sort of exposed this botnet. Remember back that crimeware family where it's not just a crew running a botnet; it is connected to an organization. Update kernel was a central component for the Neighbor botnet crews. Update kernel was a host that was registered under the same authentication mechanism as all the hosts for Neighbor. Update kernel was also the one that was targeting the federal government, going after documents that contain the word top secret, contain the word cybernet. While the Neighbor section was very unsophisticated, some of the same components were actually taking information and using it to target spearfish individual government organizations. Yeah. We're at the end, I think. Download. Just go to netverness.com. Download netverness.com. That's the place to get Investigator. The only limits on the freeware version is we can do a gig at a time. You have to, if you have a 50 gig decap, you have to make 50 chunks of it, but the commercial version has no limits like that. Okay. Any questions? Thanks very much.